Yeah.
Oh, wildflowers used out everywhere. Trying to grow anything.
It's a big movement right now across what is always been certain states right now to go with it. Their state type, your state.
Everyone goes on to see this stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, even thousands of years.
I did scatter some in that flower beds and wildflowers. I didn't realize you had to actually track the seeds.
That's what some of them.
And the reason why I guess they do well in Texas is because of the limestone.
Oh, I
Actually keeps the seed away, cracks the seed.
Oh.
It's what allows them to grow so much and so plentiful. Yeah. I did. Yeah, my son he loves the plants. He's 14. Yeah.
And my son loves to get dad to build him a flatbed garden and do all the work.
Yeah, that's right. No
Then
kidding.
after about 2 weeks,
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
dad garden.
Yeah. He's kept up with bonsai tree. Bonsai tree pretty well for a long time.
I don't know, wonder. Yes, I think terrible.
Yeah.
They were excited.
From not being fed.
No, not being fed, not being loved, just
Yeah,
because.
just because they disappeared. They are, no, we're so mine does that. I know we got it, the wetlands, just go look for wetlands and then the splash is somewhere.
Be flat now. Now they love to be flat.
Yeah,
I had one that ended up a gallon.
yes.
Yes, I heard about that, I heard about that.
I'm certain you have it in your view, so that you can go.
Well, you volunteer from among the college group up there. Take the lead.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna call this first meeting of the Old Town Advisory,
Old Town Preservation Advisory Board.
Old Town Preservation Advisory Board, meeting to order at 3:02. And first, that's our call to order. Now, no citizen comments and reports because we have a citizen here. Best have action or pass on any of the following. Introduction of board members. So we just want to go down and, all right, Kathy, you want to start and then you got
Kathy Bolton, live here in Port A, don't know what else is out there.
address?
Oh,
No, maybe not, no, no, don't do that.
Go tell
Joe Brumett,
Carl Moore, Corky.
Mallory Kalaya, Pat Cooper.
And this is, again, is more for the,
People like it.
maybe watching the public record, so. Hope everybody else knows everybody, I think.
Okay, discuss and take action to select a chairman and a vice chairman.
So do we just, nominate?
I mean, I think this kind of thing can be probably a little less formal unless you choose otherwise. I would just be honestly, to see who has an interest in doing that or would like to. And
I nominate Mallory for chairman.
Do you feel comfortable being chairperson?
Well, if y'all are comfortable.
Yes.
I second that one.
Yeah. Okay, then. All in favor?
Aye. Now,
Kathy knows the trick. First, as long as you nominate first, you let Michael.
Now we need to select a vice chair. Is anybody interested in it? First of all,
I nominate Pat. And I'll never be able to pronounce your last name right, so. Come on,
Thunberg. Okay, thank you. Yes, I'll take the challenge. Anybody else?
I'll second the nomination.
All in favor?
aye.
All opposed? Okay, Pat, you are vice chair. Vice chair.
Whoa. We're halfway through the agenda.
We're gonna be easy. This is fun. Okay.
Excited.
It is general discussion regarding the objectives, organization, processes, and citizen input for the Old Town Advisory Committee.
So if you'll indulge me, let me just, to keep from just giving you a blank page, we just kind of came up with a very generic item, agenda item there. And so really what staff would like is kind of to start to flesh out what the big objectives are. A rule of thumb, and again, this is we're here to assist, but rule of thumb is maybe probably 4, 5 if you really felt the need. Just big, good, solid objectives, just something that we can really aspire to what the end game is. And then the objectives could be how you're gonna achieve that within each one of those. So they can be, broad, but that's just a suggestion. That's kind of what we'd like to know. This is kind of a very formative meeting. This is really what this is all about for us, is just to kind of figure out how things are gonna work. And then the process is, how you guys see or would like to have council's blessing as to how the processes will work. One of the notes I made is that there's a lot of overlap between what the comprehensive plan advisory committee and citizens input into that advisory committee are doing with respect to this as well. There's already been some objectives in the comp plan, so.
About Old Town?
Right. And so just again, some guidance for us as to how, if you haven't thought about it, maybe it's a good time to think about how you'll interact with that group, who's looking at the bigger, broader picture. I kind of see this actually now is a group that will feed into that, because that's an objective of the comp plan. It's already been identified by the citizens and the advisory committee.
If I may, when does the master plan, comprehensive plan?
Maybe 18 at 6 o'clock is the next meeting.
Is it here? Is it on?
In a, not in a easily watchable way, but yes.
Okay, so 6 p.m. I'm
So the thing you should count, just because the group is in the audience and there's people who are funny, or it's in the camera, they kind of see,
but I can still
y'all.
here say what I'm doing, because I would like to. Great, you're on my bad side, so is this the name of the group that is already doing some work, is the Master Comprehensive Plan?
It's a comprehensive plan advisory committee. So they're kind of what we refer to as the stewards of the comp plan itself. And so the citizen input, which there'll be, obviously additional opportunities, several more opportunities, public events and public forums, they'll feed into that group. That group is kind of charged with taking all of the input and coalescing it and adding their own flavor to that, and then, coming up and continuing to refine the goals and objectives. We'll send out the links to the portal. It's a public portal where all this information is being gathered and stored, and there's a lot of good information. I printed out a couple of pieces just to kind of tell you as far as what they've got now. And I guess I should have made copies for everybody, but they kind of identified at early stages. Do we have this? Okay. And I think this mirrors what we're going to talk about
That's
maybe.
the doctor.
Okay. So they've already, and I'll pass this around. This is kind of what they started with. And again,
And this
These
is
are-
kind of what they're presenting us to meet on.
Now, do they meet every month on the third Wednesday?
it's,
Okay, so it's just different times?
So we're gonna have a meeting on 18th, and then we meet again a couple of times in August.
Okay.
So this that we're talking around, this is the adopted version of the preservation area of Old Town already. This is adopted already in the city of Port Aransas, and then this is what CPAC, that's the name of the group. CPAC.
advisory committee, CPAC.
Okay.
Comp plan advisory. We do a lot of acronyms.
Because I have
A note, what is CPAC?
But that's on the city website, right now there's running a little.
Yes.
Little.
that takes you to the portal that we were talking about. So this is the adopted map, and then this is a map that they're kind of gonna present at the next meeting.
So that would be large.
Right.
Very good, thank you.
Can we address something before we get any further on this? I'm sorry, I'm a little confused issues, and I think I raised it at the council meeting, but I went back and watched the previous two council meetings. And it's my understanding from what they were doing and what they were addressing, which is the board, shall essentially answer to council. Not, and
Okay.
well, not even that that we wouldn't even necessarily present P and Z, that we would present to council. In fact, that was how it was discussed in the meetings, January and February, March. And then, but even in here, it kind of says that we're still answering the council. So I'm trying to get a little clarification here about, you know, from the city charter, my understanding from the city charter anyway, is that the P and Z technically has no ability to set its own agenda other than plaques and stuff coming through, because that has to go through before. But as far as setting its own agenda for other items, it can't, if I remember correctly, because it has to be council that tells the P and Z, we want you to work on signs, we want you to work on, you know, parking. We want you to come up with some wetland protection stuff. And then it goes to P and Z, and the P and Z does whatever, and then it goes back to council. So I'm trying to figure out where we are, because we don't want to be, I mean, it's kind of like, why would we, I don't want to be, I'm not trying to say this in a bad way, I just don't think I'm not come out correctly, but it seems redundant to try to report to P and Z when P and Z would have to get authorization from the council in the first place to look at something.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and all of that, 100% depends on what you guys decide you want your mission to be, what you're gonna do. If you're gonna look at any uses, land uses, protection, height, architectural, anything like that,
Zoning.
then that is, the charter dictates that it's under P and Z's purview to recommend to council. So that would be an item, if you don't choose to do that, if you choose to say, let's just make the area a park, then maybe it would be a parks.
But when I was on the Old Town Committee before, which came out of Papa, we didn't recommend to P and Z, we went straight to them.
But there might be that some
Oh.
of their recommendations would go to council, and then council would have to say, okay, this needs to be
Oh.
the ordinance.
Oh, and then they would
Well, what did you guys do in that? What,
ordinance, Old Town, we were trying to go.
we have an ordinance, we have a resolution that dictates that area.
Nothing
Yeah,
really
really
goes
goes
on
on
to
to
ordinance
ordinance.
talking about different things
Yeah, I
that
don't know.
wanted to see to other ones more geared towards construction in Old Town.
Sure, and I don't think it was in, so P and Z is the one, staff writes the ordinances that P and Z basically goes forward that way. So I think you guys have suggestions from like council's opinions on it,
Yes.
and then council at that point would be to say, go make better suggestions, or we're gonna send this to P and Z to run.
What I'm saying is, so I would prefer that we go directly to council, and then if we have something that we want to get an ordinance for, then they can send it to you. But would there be a specific person on council that we would have, you know, conversation with, or would it be council at large?
But remember, council is 4 or more people going north and south with their heads. There is no one person.
Right, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
So, okay.
But if that's, I mean, that's what we'll take in this meeting, and we'll just tell them what.
Well, I'm just trying to, that's, at least for all practical purposes, it was how it was written. On the.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody was arguing with that.
Okay, great.
But any, like I said, anything that has to do with some of the items that were mentioned is what the board, in discussion, what the board wanted to accomplish would be things that by charter, the planning and zoning would make a recommendation to council. But it doesn't matter to us either way.
By charter and by state law.
Right, and by state.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to get it, you know, let's get our ducks in a row when we start out here. That's all. I'm just trying to understand that. And then the other thing that, is there something that we need to do about the secretary or what's?
Yeah, that's what I just, point out.
Right now.
I mean, I think that typically that's kind of somebody that's normally on city staff, that the minutes and the agenda, which you guys are, welcome to take on yourself.
Oh, God.
Is that do I hear a motion that you're volunteering?
You usually nominate me before you nominate me.
Yeah, I would just assume you do it with all, if you're gonna take it from, this is a recorded meeting. So I'm good with that, you guys.
And, did we want to address this now, or are we gonna wait till the next meeting, or what's the story?
That's what.
I guess what?
Well, we have the resolution from, 2017, and that was the one designating, but it, it was just the resolution, and I guess my question here is do we want to go ahead and get this to be an ordinance so that we can at least get this part on the books for sure, and not have it just be a resolution?
Are we
This is
comfortable with the line
resolution
drawn today?
So you're saying to a resolution, but you don't want all of it, I mean, one of these says set funding.
Well, we could, do we want to discuss? Yeah, we can do that if
Well,
you.
but this actually says that we would be accepting funding from interested citizens and the Port Aransas Historical Preservation and Historical. And I don't know if we want to, I mean, of course, we don't mind funding, but
Well, do we want to designate though? Because in the end, that's what that was about, was this designation.
Right, the boundary, are we
Yeah,
comfortable with the
the-
boundary
the-
question?
It
But
is
that-
designated.
It is designated, I know.
That's the
That's the resolution when you're
Do we
looking at.
need ordinance though?
No, a resolution has the force of law, it's voted on by council.
Okay,
A resolution is a single reading, but it has the same force of law. An ordinance, you could have 3 readings, you could probably propose it would be redone in an ordinance, but then it's gonna require 3 readings, and you probably have other things that may need to be incorporated into an ordinance in the future. I don't know that you don't typically do it one bite at a time, figure out what all you want, and it's all written into a comprehensive
So you're,
ordinance.
that's why we're asking.
so you're saying that the area is already designated by resolution.
Council
This is
already
the area, now
approved
you
the
guys
resolution,
maybe
so that,
add to that and make that, make that.
Okay, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel yet. I mean, we could, if we have some things we want to make into an ordinance, wouldn't it be easier to do it all at once? I mean, since we are already have the designation.
and again, this is what's done now, that doesn't mean that's where you want it to be, or the group wants it to be, or that's where the recommendation is. But that is in place now with the force of.
If everyone noticed the documents, they were actually a little different. So they weren't the same document. There was a draw on for the Old Town, the resolution was different than the second document that was passed around. Where the line for Old Town actually.
Right, this is not what I understood. I don't know how this got attached.
This is how it's designated. The signs are a little bit different where the signs are. So I think we would need to reread where exactly.
See, I think it's got actually put on there, I think there was another one with it, and I looked, but I don't.
But it's the same.
There was one previously, but it does have a little bit. It's not on anything we have to
Period.
say or apply for anything.
The second document she has there actually has the parent and part of.
It doesn't have all of Tarrant though, and it really needs it. Because there's 3 older houses at the very end of
So
Tarrant.
Yes,
rather
yes,
than
yes, yes.
making a discussion today, that should be an objective, in my opinion. That should be one of the objectives, is to really dedicate where that area is supposed to be.
Review and refine what the boundary.
Okay, so how do we start, how do we go about and do that? Tell you now that that's what we want to do.
So I think maybe setting those objectives of what you want this whole town preservation board to do, what your objectives are, what your goals for what you want to have accomplished are, and then set that future meeting agenda. In that.
We could go and
So this is the
our own
opportunity.
drawn sketches and come back and go, here's what I came up with.
And so we'll have an agenda item topic that's specific to
Right.
that and discussion that's appropriate.
So like that's what's on the books now. So the objective could be to, you know, to review and refine the Old Town Preservation District boundary. Is that,
Yeah, that sounds
Oh,
great.
good. Um,
It's the, I wrote down some goals, but I don't know that they're broad enough and they include.
are we consistent on what this district boundary area is called?
Yeah.
Are we, this is what
The,
the Old Town Preservation District, is that gonna be
They call
your
it-
working title?
they call it,
in the ordinance, it's
the resolution, they call it,
Historic-
historic old
Historic.
town district.
Right, so we've got,
Review and refine the boundary and name.
I don't know, I mean, I'm not opposed to that name, are y'all?
I think we're safer sticking with preservation personally for several reasons to do with, the Texas Historical Commission. I think we
Keep it less than.
keep it less confusing.
Okay, good idea.
so.
Versus keeping it short in like Old Town.
Well, everyone's gonna call it Old Town something.
Old
Just
Town Preservation District at least sounds official, right? But everybody will call it Old Town.
OTPD,
like Town Preservation District.
so I'm gonna actually incorporate that into the goal, review and refine boundary of the OTPD.
Well, we would officially have to change that name.
Well, again, we'll do it all in one fell swoop.
Yeah, let's make it easy.
I think because there's not 51% of historical buildings in the district anymore, that you can't really call it
Right,
historical.
that is correct.
So,
Well, I mean, we could,
We could.
the state's not gonna recognize it as historic.
yeah, the state, I mean, that's what the state
But it might be
recommended
confusing.
making a prison.
I mean, it is historical to us.
It sure it is.
There are a lot of things that they don't consider a historical building is for us historical. And I know that Cliff has instituted a program of getting plaques for some of the historical buildings to put up around here.
You could call it Old Town Historical Preservation District.
I know.
You get it even bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I like Old Town Preservation District.
Well, like I said, it goes out, it's an objective and you can have some revelation.
Come up with a better
After
acronym.
the last line, it hasn't been a better. We'll call it a working title for now.
Yeah.
So, like I said, at least we have that. Other goals.
Well, I think we need to, one of my goals or objectives would be to get input from citizens and tourists if they want to. I think one of the easiest ways to do that would be maybe to have an email for this board that people could actually email us at one big heading, and then it bounced to all of us and Nicole.
Okay, and what was the input? What are you asking them for? What do you want them to help?
Ideas. I mean, for ideas of what they want to see in Old Town, concerns.
From the citizens specifically, I think ultimately that's what, you know, really be attending these meetings with us, right, and providing that feedback. So maybe that open channel would always be, extremely important. I think one of the agendas that items of camp was find a way to provide incentives for similar like architecture within Old Town. And whether that's a specific ordinance or whatever that is. But not only for residential, but also commercial, if that's possible, if we're not violating any laws there. So,
To try to come up with a consistent look, feel,
yeah, mainly on
aesthetic,
elevation,
aesthetic,
mainly
put
elevation,
that in there.
yeah.
To
Similar to
include,
what we've run into on the corner of Cotter and
to
Alistair.
include the elevation, you're talking about height?
No, not, elevation of the building, so the look at the front. You know, if you look on the page.
Oh, well, that type of elevation.
Yeah, yeah,
The architectural.
the architectural, right, sure,
The
certainly.
look, yeah.
Yeah, like what we've experienced with the Cotter development, right? Certainly something needs to go in there. It's gonna be wonderful to have, but I don't think a lot of folks in town that have been here for many years would really care about having train cars parked there, you know? so
And I just, so Melanie, that to me is kind of that's why I asked you about the citizen input. To me, the citizen input would be on each of these objectives you come up with. So how do you feel about the boundary goals? How do you feel about the aesthetics? So that's kind of a, it's not, to me, it's not so much a goal as it is an objective as to how you refine the goals. So we'll add it in. I'm gonna pin it to the side here, but does that make sense? Rather the way, okay.
Yeah,
And I'm interested, I don't know, you can handle it however you want, but, I'm interested in saving old structures in Old Town that we can, even if we have to move them, or maybe if someone doesn't want their building, instead of, tearing it down, maybe they can donate it to the city and they will get a tax write-off, and we might try to see how we could move that building to maybe an Old Town center. We've got the community center, which is an old building, and I know we recently purchased, at the old lot from the U.S. County. And I know we quite in that area.
They're asking y'all to speak into your microphones, they can't hear you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, that helps, it's important.
Okay.
All along Alistair there, where the community center is, there's a lot of old buildings that are used for businesses, and I would like to see us try to save those old buildings and maybe put them in a different location, so someone could use the building for a small business, so that ultimately we get people walking all the way up and down Alistair, and that might be, I don't know, we might need more sidewalks, I don't know where the sidewalks end and begin right now, but I'm thinking of something like Duval Street in Key West. All those old buildings have little restaurants and businesses in them, and people walk up and down there. I mean, it's a huge tourist draw, as well as, the locals go there. So, I would like to see some type of, Old Town Center and the preservation of old houses or old structures.
So elaborate a little bit on your thinking on the center. Talking about like some town center within this area.
Possibly, but not necessarily, because, we kind of have a center in that community center area, because of the way the buildings are set. But I wouldn't want to take away from the rest of Alistair, because there's a lot of businesses, people seem to walk that Alistair corridor a lot. And so, it would be neat to have something that comes all the way up around Alistair to the corner of Alistair and Cotter that would draw people.
So could I try this? Could we add it to review and refine boundary of the OTPD and try to determine a town center? Sure. Because I think it's part of that same boundary identification.
Yeah, I think a town center, not a square necessarily, a center.
Okay. I think it fits.
Land is pretty good.
With wildflowers.
Yeah. You have to do anything with them.
Pre-cracked seeds.
True, correct.
That's something I would like to see too, more landscape, even if people have to take their concrete parking and build some planters in some areas of that concrete parking, it would just be nice to see landscaping as opposed to the concrete parking, especially in Old Town. That's a beef of mine. It's been, and as everybody knows, it's been a beef of mine for a while.
But then they don't have to tear up concrete to get a plant, I mean, it's a
That's right.
simple.
That's right. There are ways of doing it, and I've seen there's a lot of effective ways of doing it that other places have employed. It's really not that hard. It doesn't even have to be a cement boat. Okay?
Could we plug that into Corky's, which I kind of took his kind of aesthetics and incentives to achieve those aesthetics to include maybe more impervious, more pervious surface and landscaping, add pervious surface and landscaping to that.
Certainly.
I mean, it kind of fits in with that.
Yeah, no,
So
absolutely.
that does, okay. If it doesn't tell me, I'm
No,
trying to take a lot of notes.
Okay.
A little bit about preservation, because one of the other things I'm obligated to just make sure, and Courtney touched on it, but I gotta elaborate on it, which is, we've just gotta make sure that, and this isn't staff, this is something that we involve our city attorney, but we just need to ensure that any restrictions, on property, use, the character of the land or anything else, obviously be legal. So when we're talking about preserving buildings, obviously that's gotta probably be, there's gotta be some kind of voluntary, gotta be some kind of cooperative.
True, we're not, yeah, we're
So
not.
I get the goal, I just wanna, this was a good opportunity to kind of elaborate on that legal piece that you just need to be sensitive of.
Oh, yeah.
As far as the takings issue and.
Right.
There's vested incentives versus restrictions, looking at it from that perspective, if it's possible.
And it could be something as simple as, if somebody owns a property and simply is going to do something else different within whatever, rules or maybe there is some incentive to at least allow them consideration of building be removed, or, maybe there's some funding that for an older building. And again, I can't, obviously, it's a budget issue, but the city can maybe offer, there could be some plan that the city can move an older building, like was attempted over there,
Yes. Marlene Carter.
Right.
Big one.
didn't work out, but,
Right, right.
I guess Shorty's comment probably counts as,
Well,
if
Shorty's-
there's anything that's historic, I'm sure there's any argument that Shorty's is that, and, I think it is gonna be moved, so.
Hopefully, I mean, I'm very hopeful about that. I think that would be a great addition to Old Town. Also, if we
No, I just want to say also there's residences, that really qualify. I'm going to say right
Yes.
now, Luke and Willie Daly's house, that's over 100 years old. So is the
Mhm.
Carter house right across the street, and clearly done by the same builder. So we've got these houses running around through town. A lot of people don't realize it. And I think it's neat for us to look at when we talk about preservation. Even if it's our own little something, I realize this is down the line, but, some little designated placard that just says, hey, here's one that survived 4 major hurricanes, and still standing.
And I'll throw this out there, because we talked about it, and again, to Willie, a good example that, I know the house well. For years, I looked at the big burn hole in the roof while it sat there semi-condemned until I think they bought it after that. But it's people like Willie that you might want to reach out to, because if you're gonna steer the ship, if you're gonna really try to make any kind of effective changes and preserve anything, it's gotta start with people like them that are passionate, and start de-restricting these properties. Get people to raise their hand and say, okay, I'm committed, I'm gonna restrict my property, so it'll never be short-term rental. And it doesn't matter what the state does and comes in, and once you've done that,
how do
then
you do that, Rick? How do you do
it's your property, you can de-restrict it, it's filed as a public record, so whenever something happens and that property is resold, it shows up on a title policy. Janice Snow did that for the development down on, 11th. She de-restricted that to CR3, hotels, motels, short-term rentals. He restricted it to an R1 type of use only.
On 12th, it's on 12th and right around summer.
No, it's on 11, it's a subdivision,
Yes.
no,
It's the same
No, no, no.
zone on all of
It's
it.
G and, is it the one it's bounded by G and 10?
El Pescador?
No, not El Paso.
Something like that, I would say,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, because, and just had a conversation with Toby, said that they
somebody
will
else
enforce that.
recently did that too, they bought a property,
But this is a,
rezoned it, and
Yeah.
then sold the property, so it couldn't be built.
anyway, but, I'll, yeah, ask her what, I don't
Okay.
think, although, for that anyway, but it's restricted, be restricted and not allowed within them. It's not a bylaw, it's not covenant, it's a deed restriction.
So is that a form that you file with the county?
It's a legal form, legal document that just says that forever, and it's, like Sandpiper Estates, over there, CC for Western Kansas, that the Sandpiper portion of that had restrictions. They had an HOA at one time. HOA went away, but Charlie Don actually, when he did that, he restricted that to size. You gotta have a certain size property.
Okay.
Those deed restrictions, supersede. City doesn't enforce them, but they're enforceable. They do enforce the law. My point is, people can do that. And we need to let them know and find those people that are passionate about it. And just say, I'm willing to do it. I'll deed restrict my property to keep it from ever being, because if you don't, a lot of instances, the state steps in and takes that authority away from you.
The trick is to actually enforce it, or if after so many years, if someone isn't enforcing it and violating the restriction, then it actually will change back to be, short term or whatever it is, whatever use they have for the property.
But like I said, when somebody buys or sells it, it'll become a part of that public record, the title company will pick it up. And, even if it was neglected to be mentioned to that potential purchaser, they're, like I said, right in front of them, on a title policy. Just an idea, I mean, just, like I said, because those are the kind of things that can prevail and endure. People come and go and pass and partly inherited, and so, sometime like the present.
Could we also do as an objective or goal, education of people that come to Port Aransas? How we do it, but to educate them, like you go to other historic districts, I'm thinking about when I drive to Cuero, they have a historic district. And, they have like little flags that say, you were in a historic district. I know we have the signs. I'm just saying, I think we need to do some education also.
But I think it's, and I just added that as another goal, because you've got obviously a pretty vibrant Preservation Historical Association, you've got a brand new museum going up. So, maybe part of your objective as a board could be helping with that education and promotion of the history for that. Is that okay to add that as a goal? You think that's a valid?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Okay.
I'm gonna put educate and promote
Mhm.
for a history.
So in terms of, houses that are, how about, if we had people that wanted to buy a lot in Old Town and build something there, I know right now you cannot go above 27 feet if your lot size is not more than 5,000, correct? And I'm not sure how many people, and this may be a moot point, I'm not sure how many houses we have in our lots that are more than 5,000 in Old Town, because a lot of them are small.
Probably pretty good.
Is there,
I don't know.
Yeah.
It.
On the large.
I would. Right, and I would like to see the areas that are basically two-story houses remain two-story houses and not three if there's a way to do that legally. And I don't know if that would be you would have to say, I mean, you know, a house that's already, there's grandfathering if you do start making restrictions, but I'm not sure how all that would work legally. What I'm, of course, thinking of is even if the lot was bigger than 5,000 square feet, those three houses, even if all those three lots were combined on the corner, well, right there on Station Street, Station and Oaks, even if they had been one lot, I don't think it's appropriate to put a three-story house there, personally, because everything around it are two stories and it looks out of place. So I wanted to bring that up. I don't know if there's a way to do that.
So you don't want anything in that area to be taller than 27 feet? Determining areas that, no matter what the lot size is?
No, not necessarily 27 feet, but maybe two stories. And I mean, they may be two large stories, but three-story houses, when you get into, you know, you have a base flood elevation that's what now, 11 and a half according to
It's
FEMA?
different, yeah, base flood elevation is different no matter what, I mean, depending on where you are.
Right, and is it not 11 and a half feet now?
I mean, it's different for every single lot.
It's 8 to 10 feet is the base flood elevation, and
Wait a minute.
we adopt the,
So there's maps that, there's different base flood elevation levels for every area.
I did not know that. I thought that you had to be 11 and a half feet above sea level.
No, no.
It's not, it's
You have
not.
to be 1 foot above whatever your base flood elevation is.
some areas that's 9.
Most
some
of
10.
town, their base flood elevation is 8, so you have to be at 9 feet.
So that's determined by the map.
By FEMA.
So how is that measured?
Like, I mean, above it from a,
From sea level.
From sea level. Okay, okay, okay.
Because it reflects correctly, the 1% chance that you'll have a flood event in 1 year.
Right.
In an 8 foot, you have a 1% chance in a year to have a flood event.
in everything.
Every year, yeah. 9 feet, that's why we go 1 foot, that's why we kind of mirror what the code says, we go 1 foot above whatever FEMA says the base flood is.
And so some areas, their base flood elevation is 14 feet, so they have to be above 14 feet in
Yes.
order to be at
Stop.
that 1%.
Well, and maybe,
Yeah, this drives some of the issues with the height
yeah,
changes because,
Mhm.
because that base
Yeah.
flood, you're either gonna bring in fill dirt or you're gonna raise the building, and you still need a two-story house, now you're on stilts, which is what you're considering 3 stories,
So we
which can kind of throw things off for a purchaser, right?
Livable
Right.
stories is.
There you go, livable stories.
Right.
Right.
And you have a constraint, when you go back to true Old Town. That's why you saw so many of the houses built up on stilts, because they were smaller lots. And they used the parking, so they were 2 foot.
Mhm, that's
You know,
true.
you were able to park underneath, but you also got that flood up there. I mean, you got your house above flood level, so that's the one, you know, again, you'll probably hear that from people. Well, wait a minute, I want to build up, so I can park underneath because parking is a problem and you want to encourage that.
Yeah.
But then they want, two livable stories. So, hey, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to think on that more.
And then it goes back to the question, and I think it's valid. I don't know, we're not qualified to give a legal opinion on where you can set a restriction and where it starts to become a taking.
Right.
Right.
And maybe no one can until somebody challenges it.
I think something that would be helpful would be to see the Old Town district with the current FEMA flood levels, base flood levels, and where it would be helpful in understanding.
We got a vendor, Nicole, we're gonna pitch for this
Hey, Rick,
next year's budget.
with the height thing, we didn't really change the height in our, when we changed all the density stuff.
We did.
We did? I thought it was always 27 foot when you had a smaller lot. For
What you changed
townhomes
was
and all
if
that.
it was platted after or previous.
If it was a legally platted lot, and it wasn't in certain areas, then you could go to 35. But now but now nothing under 5,000 feet can go to 30.
The ordinance said if you were under 5,000 square feet and platted before a certain date, you
Oh,
were
yeah.
okay. If you were platted after a certain date, you were restricted to 27. You guys took away that platted date and you said if your lot is under 5,000 square feet, no matter when you are platted, it has to be. Okay.
The other comment that I have is that, we have a lot of restaurants on Beach Street, and we have a three-story restaurant that built there that looks nothing like the rest, and it looks out of place, and I've had more comments on that one building than even the three on Station. And so I'd like to find a way to maybe mitigate that somewhat, that you don't go in, of course, now they couldn't do it because that lot's not 5,000 square feet, so it may not matter. It may not be something that matters.
Because that's still quite a commercial use.
Well, but
And you
again,
look at, I guess, the polarization.
I'll play devil's advocate. Let me
Okay.
let me tell you what you're gonna hear. You're gonna hear, well, wait a minute. Port Aransas has always been eclectic, and it's always been this mix of crazy hodgepodge, different types of things. That's Old Town,
That's true.
And you'll hear that, so just, again,
But most of them were not extremely tall.
I was gonna say,
They
yeah,
are not extremely tall,
they were more like single story
or two-story.
and two-story at best, and very yeah, they were funky, no question. Everybody remembers Cooper's Alley, it's pretty funky.
I think that lot is a
yeah, it's probably.
It is
Well,
more.
it definitely is now because they bought the property, okay? So now-
but I think
But
that's.
they would have had to replat it to make
Right.
it.
I think they're going to.
So anyway, okay, that's just a concern.
But
That's all.
again, and maybe it's the character with the adjacency. And again, another difficult one. I mean, how do you tell one person they can't, the other they are? But you write it down, make your wish list. Not ours, so.
Well,
Yeah.
underneath the, what Courtney was talking about as far as architecture, I mean, can there be specifics as to what style kind of
Kind of.
fits in?
And I sent some information out. Again, the state stepped in, that with rare exception, you can't really, one thing they did say is that they came and said, you can't tell somebody that they have to build out of masonry, shiplap, corrugated metal. If it's an approved building material in the code, which is a pretty big list, then by state law now you have to allow them to build.
That is true, but Rick, I'm gonna have to step in on this one, and I don't have it with me, I meant to bring it, but there is a state law that was passed after that, and it was passed in 2019. And that state law deals with that issue, and so if you had designated an area as a preservation or some type of district, then prior to May of 2019, then you can, dictate certain things about materials and what you want to see, like structurally in some of the areas in your district that you designate, but it had to be prior to 19.
We have it right here, and it's gonna be a state historic district. And
It's also that item number 6.
we'll give you, I don't wanna get into arguments. We'll give you the law, you guys decide. I'm just telling you that the law and interpretation is that there's very limited architectural control that you have. I'll give you the, that is my interpretation. You certainly are welcome to look at it. And do with it as you please. My job is to tell you, this is the professional staff, that's our interpretation. We've looked at it, talked about it. There's a few exceptions, but the districts are gonna be state designated districts.
Oh, a state designated historical.
They're not gonna be,
Usually historical is what the key is, which means you can't change structure, you can't change footprint, there's a lot of things that go into that.
Actually, it also said though, for any district of the city or municipality, it does again, and it's just in there, it's number 6 or whatever. I had it looked at by a couple of attorneys to double check and make sure, so.
But there are ways around this potentially, and
That's
just
what I was
throw an
finding.
example out. One would be to potentially decrease the height for Old Town building structures based on lot size or whatever that may be. And then provide incentives for certain type of architecture to allow higher structures. So if they're following this, then there's an incentive, right? Rather than it being restricted, it's incentive. And then we kind of get back into, now you can't prevent them from or whoever, from building maybe something that you don't necessarily like out of center, but whatever it is. But you could certainly incentivize and let them build into that higher.
absolutely correct.
But, and then
But
that,
yeah,
keeping our like our.
Yeah, since you've done some research, I would really appreciate if you'll get all that stuff to your fellow members there, that you talk to some attorneys, get it to them, it'll save us some legal fees, but you'll do it for the next meeting.
Yes, I do know
We'll get
all the
the- we'll get
beautiful
the-
things.
And then we'll give you guys again, I'm just throwing it out there. And it's not gonna be quite, as you can't just come in and say, you know what, we want everything to look like this. They've taken some of those rights away. So I don't,
Certainly, whatever we come up with, we want to have some bite to it and actually make, otherwise time spent. We're not gonna get much out of it.
Yes,
So let's find that middle ground where we can get some traction.
Yeah, I don't, excuse me, I don't think we're trying to force anybody to do something that they don't want to do with their property. I think the incentives and things like that. And hoping that they would want to, be on the same page or something. That's all we can.
you're absolutely right. Incentives are always the best way to, try to accomplish
And his-
something. And there's impact fees and there's building permit fees and there's all sorts of things that,
And historical houses can get tax abatement.
Yes,
Mhm.
which is part of the impact fees. It could be, again, as long as it's applied across the district and then brought back depending on what incentives we're providing, there's potentially decrease in things like impact fees based on it could be use of gutters. I mean, gutters provide a phenomenal way to save our runoff. And right now, we're not doing it anywhere. We have no ordinance around that at all. I don't necessarily think it should be Old Town ordinance, but it certainly would help to have that, specifically with metal roofs. Because the pounding that we're having with moisture, whether we have rain or not, it's hitting our sand, and our sand right now it's dry as can be. So it's like, yeah, so every time you have something dripping off your three-story building, it's just moving that sand away, further and further away.
Right now, if you water, it's ponding.
Yeah,
It's dry.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
ponding.
the dirt's moving out, yeah.
that's a pretty good list, pretty good grouping of goals right now. What else?
We might be making our agenda for the year right now.
Let's, we always come back to it, but let's try to get a couple of things. So meeting frequency, what have you guys thought, or what do you think as far as a meeting schedule is something, like monthly?
Definitely monthly, I would think.
I would agree.
Okay.
What day is preferable? Everybody has.
What's the least conflicting for any of you?
That's true.
Or,
We're here.
I would personally rather it be on a Monday, but that might not be possible. I know there's, well, planning and zoning is on Monday. Oh, Tuesday.
Council on Thursday, Mondays,
that a
and then you run into holidays,
Mhm.
Oh,
frequency
Long
holidays,
weekends,
pretty
yeah.
well on Monday.
okay. Tuesday and, well, P and Z meets on Tuesday.
but now we're
That's
getting on
Tuesday.
the side.
Okay. That. Is it?
Sometimes there's like parks and stuff like that too, but as long as we're not conflicting with it.
Right.
Think of it from our audience perspective, is it easier for somebody to watch a P and Z meeting and our meeting all in a day, or is it better to break that up across multiple days where they maybe have an hour here, hour there, depending on what they want to participate?
Well, Teams is not as,
Right,
the
right,
guys did the difference, you said,
right, there you go.
from the city staff standpoint, it would make a difference.
I was gonna say, the last Wednesday of the month, so the last Tuesday of the month, last Wednesday of the month,
Last Tuesday is P and Z.
that's like we can take the Wednesday, is that?
Well, could
Or you
we-
can do the first
second
Tuesday,
that?
or
First Tuesday, sure.
Oh, it doesn't have to be posted 72 hours ahead of time, since there was any kind of agenda packet, that's when it would come out. That's, we're not the same time as Teams, that makes sense.
Okay, there you go.
A week before, a
Yeah.
week after would be great.
So then, yeah, there you go.
So you said their last,
No, the last Tuesday
Tuesday,
of the month.
we don't want to first Tuesday because
Okay.
well, it doesn't give you that much time.
It would be okay after, as long as it's not at the same time, I've got plenty of time.
Second Tuesday.
Yeah, any other Tuesday.
Which what we're doing right now, we're on the
Yeah.
second Tuesday. Today's second Tuesday. So.
This would be right in between, council.
So,
Second Tuesday next month would be the seventh, no,
13,
14th. Oh, no, no,
or 14, sorry.
second Tuesday. I won't be here. We're all probably gonna miss some meetings. Okay. I mean, if it's all agreeable with everyone.
Third Tuesday is fine, anything works. As long as it's not the same thing.
No. Third Tuesday. Doesn't matter. Okay.
That'll be a month and a week before we meet, and
June 21st.
just a heads up. Certainly.
That'll be June 21st.
Right,
That's correct.
what time?
3,
this is a good time for us.
Yeah.
During the day before.
what about you? I know you're busy.
Yeah, I can always wait. I might just come dirty like I am today, if that's okay. If it's middle of the day, I'm not gonna have time to shower, because I'm going back up.
Three. Great.
June 21st, that is the day that we get the ruling from the ALJ. For the board. Knew there was something significant there.
Let's see. Pat, or, probably Pat, somebody, citizen input, please go back to that.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts beyond the comments that I'm always allowed to make? I think at least for the near term, I think the comp plan provides an avenue for that to happen. If perhaps we can create a channel that's more directed toward this particular group within that comp plan, because like I said, it's already an objective. We can maybe get with the facilitators, the consultants, and just let them know what we're doing when they come here on the 18th.
Okay.
Week, and see if that may be a good mechanism for that input. And I would encourage some of you to be at that group and talk to the advisory committee and maybe refine what they perceive the old town goal and objective to be within the comp plan. And maybe that can be refined a little bit and more closely match yours. And I think there's some synergy. That's a great word. I just think there's some synergy there with that process. Who's already promoting and reaching out to the citizens and creating an online portal for them to contribute if they can't make the in-person meetings.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, so like, that's already happening. So I think
Right.
that just seems to me to be so easy to feed into what you guys are doing.
Is there something like that specifically to share documentation and
Mhm.
information for this group already made?
Now, what they've refined as, again, they took all the input from the public meetings, added their own twist, flavor, whatever it is, but mostly it reflects what the community came out and those meetings represented. So I think it's gonna be a little different with respect to what you've refined here today, but I don't think that they would be hesitant to merge the two or make it more similar to what you guys want. You will feed into that.
Certainly.
And they
I
may
think
like that. I mean, the advisory committee may like you being kind of we'll call it a subset of that group.
Right.
You're a standalone group here, obviously, but you could be a subset of that complex, which is kind of how I'm seeing this maybe play out, which would be great.
Instead of them trying to work out all the issues you guys work out.
Right.
Yeah.
For the specifics,
And it really
certainly.
needs to happen that way, because you don't want them getting citizen input and them doing one thing, and it's not exactly along the same path as to what you've been charged to do. So I think that you know, we'll coordinate with the facilitators and let somebody get with them and explain to them what's going on here. that way. And it becomes a repository for information as well. I mean, the online portal, if you haven't, gone to, go, there's a lot of good information. And like Pat said, you go to the city webpage, it pops up, right there in front, it's that important, and you can go right to the portal from that first click, so, look around and see if they found them.
And come to the meeting.
I would be a fan.
I've attended, I think, all of them. I don't know, I've
I
attended.
didn't think
most of them.
Mango,
No,
mango.
Yeah, no, and I guess,
Next,
I don't know.
we come next.
We come tomorrow.
Yeah. I don't remember, I remember seeing it, I don't remember what time. Six.
More housekeeping, but, information, contact information, email addresses amongst the group here, or is there, you can't, okay.
It'll be on our website,
Okay,
but I can share that.
is there also a place for like documents, like a central document location, maybe it's file storage, whatever it is, so we can share assets rather than trying to blast them out there? Can we make those on our own? Doesn't make it,
Yeah, you have to be careful of the open meeting.
which is why I'm asking.
If you ever want to just send me information, I don't have the first one.
There we go.
I
That's
think
fine.
that's always kind of the case.
Okay.
And like with any work product, like I said, that's why I really think that we can use the comp plan portal, and just make sure they have a
Such that, yeah, where we can actually utilize. That's great. Okay.
Is there a city website for, a community board or something that
Like
is
an
now
intranet?
operating or not?
For the city council.
That's strictly for
Council.
council, it's not for like city, like, okay, all right. Just checking.
I mean, those are the things that I had to start with as far as the organizational part of it, so. That's all I got. I'll leave it at that.
Go over there.
Yeah, so let me count, make sure all the same page. So I've got 4 goals. So, one was review and refine the boundary of the OPPD, Old Town Preservation District, and try to identify it, if possible, a town center. 2 was kind of the aesthetics goal, incentives to achieve, a desired outcome, to include landscaping, urban surface. The big piece of that. The preservation of old town buildings. And then 4 was educate, promote, coordinate history.
One thing that really wasn't incorporated in there is now we training.
I kind of had that in mind. Maybe aesthetics and incentives, yeah.
Yeah, and I would just put architectural elevation is probably the best way to go about saying that. There's architectural elevation.
Architectural.
Two links, one to this, to street sweeper. And then the other one is about strong towns, and maybe check it out too, but very, very helpful, beneficial. For kind of what we're doing, specifically subgroups.
Good stuff, you guys were up? Yeah. Oh, exactly, that's good.
I didn't have to count.
The easy part is identify, guys.
Yeah,
The hard part is
Have a coffee.
yeah.
rolling up the sleeves and digging into some of
I
it.
better go and lock the doors.
Good. Well, and anything from the cheap seats over there?
No. Not unless we have a better map. Do we have a better map? Overlay? Oh,
I might be able to blow that one
When you
out.
say a better map, what do you mean?
just where it's more defined, what streets and everything we've always had with,
Mhm.
They're from the resolution, I'll show you.
okay,
We're gonna blow it up.
where you can read it and stuff.
Well, we're ready. All right,
I
Carol,
could join this meeting at,
4:14. Rick, I want to say when
Thank y'all.
you weren't in here when Pat said, I've got to sit where because her ear and her hearing, so when she said you're on my bad side, that's what happened to her.
I was gonna clarify, we got so far now, I couldn't say.
That's for what you're talking.
Yeah. You've never heard that before, have you? You're on my bad side.
Wait, went to the positive, so I immediately went to that positive side of knowing.
Yeah, I help us chuckling.
I, I.
Never
Very much.